I'm sitting here telling you this because a month ago, I found my daughter homeless with a newborn after. She swore she was just taking some time. This story is inspired by real-life submissions. Names and identifying details have been changed. I saw her through the glass window of the bank branch on Miller Street. At first, I told myself it wasn't her. It couldn't be. My daughter wouldn't be sitting on cardboard next to a dumpster, wrapped in a donated blanket, face unwashed, hair tangled. The woman I was looking at had that hollowed-out look people get when they've been invisible too long, when nobody sees them anymore. But it was her, Clover, my daughter. 66 days postpartum, I crossed the street without thinking. My hands were shaking. A couple walked past her. Teenagers laughed nearby, and nobody stopped. Nobody looked twice. She'd become the kind of person people step around. Clover. She looked up. Her eyes went wide, then filled. She tried to smile, tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. I reached for her and felt how thin she'd gotten, how cold. Mom, her voice cracked. It's okay. It's just for a little while. Just for a little while? That's what she'd said on the phone a month ago when I asked why she hadn't called. When I asked if everything was all right after the baby came. A volunteer from the shelter down the block came over, clipboard in hand. He looked at me like I was intruding. Is she bothering you? He asked me. She's my daughter. He blinked. Then he lowered his voice, like Clover couldn't hear him standing right there. She seems confused sometimes. Doesn't remember things clearly. I stared at him, confused. That word again? Clover looked away, shame burning red across her cheeks. That's when I saw the envelope. Crumpled, half-tucked under her blanket. Papers sticking out. I pulled it toward me. Discharge papers from Good Shepherd Hospital. A notarized form I didn't recognize. A name I knew too well at the bottom. Brian. Her husband. Clover. I said quietly. Where's the baby? She flinched. Safe. With him. He said I couldn't. He said I wasn't stable enough. Stable enough. I opened her phone. The screen was cracked. Battery at 4%. There were missed calls. Dozens. Most of them from me. But there was something else. A voicemail. Unopened. Sent 6 days after she gave birth. I pressed play. Her own voice came through, shaking, desperate. Mom, I don't know what to do. He won't let me leave the room. He took my card. He says I'm too emotional, that I'm not thinking straight. I just need the message cut off. I looked at her. Clover, what happened? She swallowed hard. Her hands were trembling now. He told everyone I left, she whispered. He told them I couldn't handle being a mother, that I walked out on him and the baby. But I didn't, Mom. I swear I didn't. He made me leave. He changed the locks. He took everything. Her voice broke completely, and nobody believed me. I felt something harden in my chest, something cold and clear. I looked down at the discharge papers again, at the notarized signature, at the date. Why was his name the only one on the release form? Why did he sign her out of the hospital alone? I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called an attorney. Because I knew one thing for certain now. Someone had been lying. And it wasn't my daughter. The hospital receptionist looked at me like I'd asked her to break into a vault. Ma'am, we can't just release medical records without proper authorization. I kept my voice steady. I'm her mother. She's sitting right here. She's authorizing it. The woman's eyes flicked to Clover, then back to me. There was something in that look. Pity, maybe, or doubt. The case was already closed, she said carefully. Her husband handled the discharge. Everything was processed correctly. Correctly? I felt Clover shrink beside me. What does that mean? I asked. Closed how? The receptionist typed something, frowned at her screen. It means there's nothing to follow up on. She was released into his care. Standard postpartum protocol. Standard. I was about to push harder when someone touched my elbow. Mrs. Hayes? I turned. A woman in scrubs, older, with kind eyes and tired lines around her mouth. Her badge read Bonnie Fletcher, RN. "I thought that was you," she said quietly. She glanced at Clover. "And you?" Clover looked up, confused. Bonnie stepped closer, lowering her voice so the receptionist wouldn't hear. "I was on shift the night you delivered. I remember because—" she hesitated. "Because your husband was very insistent about managing everything himself." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, insistent?" Bonnie looked uncomfortable. Professional caution wrestled with something else on her face. "He signed all the discharge papers. Alone. You were still groggy from the epidural and he said you'd already agreed to everything. I tried to wait until you were more alert, but he said you were too emotional. That you needed rest, not paperwork. Too emotional." Clover's breath hitched beside me. "There was a Medicare form," Bonnie continued. "For the baby's coverage. The signature looked, I don't know. I flagged it with my supervisor, but she said it was fine. That husbands sign for their wives all the time." I stared at her. "He forged her signature." "I can't say that officially," Bonnie said quickly, "but I can tell you this. 3 days after discharge, someone called the nurses' station. A woman. She said she needed help, that she couldn't get back into her house, that her husband had locked her out." Clover went pale. "That was me," she whispered. "I called from a gas station, but nobody came." Bonnie's face softened with regret. "The call got logged as a welfare check, but when they contacted your address, your husband said you'd left voluntarily, that you were struggling with postpartum depression and had refused treatment. He sounded so calm, so concerned. Calm, concerned. I thought about Brian, smooth-talking Brian, with his banker's smile and his perfect explanations for everything. "Do you still have that call log?" I asked. Bonnie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I kept a copy, off the record, because something felt wrong." She pulled out her phone, scrolled, then showed me a screenshot. A date, a time, a note in shorthand. "Patient C. Hayes called requesting help. Husband contacted. Stated patient experiencing PPD, left AMA. Case closed AMA against medical advice." Except Clover never left against medical advice. She'd been sent home. By Brian? With paperwork she never saw. "He built a whole story," I said slowly. "Before she even knew she needed to defend herself." Bonnie nodded. "I've seen it before. Not often, but I've seen it." Clover was shaking now. "Nobody's going to believe me. He made it official. He made me look crazy." I took her hand, squeezed hard. "He made you look invisible," I said. "That's different." I looked at Bonnie. "Can you get us copies of everything? The call log, the discharge forms, the Medicare application?" Bonnie glanced over her shoulder. The receptionist was on the phone now, distracted. "Meet me in the parking garage in 20 minutes, she said. Level 3. And don't tell anyone I helped you." She walked away before I could thank her. Clover looked at me, eyes wet, terrified. "Mom, what if this doesn't matter? What if nobody cares?" I thought about that voicemail, about the crumpled discharge papers, about Brian's perfect, calm voice explaining away his wife's desperate phone call. "Then we make them care," I said. But first, I needed to know who else had believed him, and why it had been so easy. The bank was cold, not just temperature. The whole place felt sterile, indifferent, like suffering didn't exist inside those glass walls. Clover sat beside me, staring at her hands. She hadn't said much since we left the hospital. I think part of her was still processing the fact that someone had actually believed her. The account manager appeared, mid-40s, crisp shirt, practiced smile. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Derek Foster. How can I help you today?" I slid the old debit card across the desk. Clover's name was on it. Joint account with Brian. My daughter needs access to her account. He typed something, frowned, typed again. I'm sorry, but this account was closed. Clover's head snapped up. What? Closed, he repeated, softer now. 2 days after. He checked the screen. After the birth of your child, your husband submitted a request to transfer all funds to a new account in his name only. I felt my jaw tighten. Did my daughter authorize that? Derek looked uncomfortable. According to our records, she wasn't in a position to manage financial decisions at that time. There it was again. That phrase, not in a position. Who decided that? I asked. He hesitated. Your husband provided documentation stating that you were experiencing postpartum complications and had granted him temporary power of attorney. Clover made a sound like she'd been hit. I never signed anything, she said. I didn't even know he could do that. Derek's expression shifted. Just slightly. Doubt creeping in. Ma'am, I'm not saying you're lying, but our system shows can we see the documentation? I interrupted. He blinked. I'd need to check with my manager. Then check. He stood, uncertain, and disappeared through a door behind the counter. Clover turned to me, whispering urgently. Mom, I don't remember signing anything. I was barely conscious. The only thing I remember signing was the birth certificate. I remembered Bonnie's words. Husbands sign for their wives all the time. How many places had Brian done this? How many people had just accepted his word because he sounded reasonable? A voice spoke behind us. Excuse me. We turned. An older man, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Patrick Delgado, branch manager. I overheard some of what you were saying, he said quietly, and I pulled the file myself. He handed me a folder. Inside were photocopies. Transfer request. Signed authorization. I stared at the signature. It looked like Clover's name, but the handwriting was shaky, uncertain. Does this look like your signature? I asked her. She studied it, then shook her head slowly. The letters are wrong. I don't write my C like that. And look at the date. Patrick leaned in. March 15th, Clover said. I was still in the hospital. I couldn't even hold a pen. My hands were swollen from the 4. Patrick's face darkened. Did you keep any discharge papers? Anything with your actual signature from that day? I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope Bonnie had given us, found the hospital bracelet, the birth certificate. Patrick compared them side by side. The signatures didn't match. He exhaled slowly. Ma'am, I think you need to file a formal complaint. This could be fraud. Clover looked like she might be sick. He took everything. The savings. The emergency fund. Everything we had. How much? I asked. Patrick checked the screen. $18,400. I felt cold. That was her inheritance from her father. Money she'd saved for years. Money that was supposed to be for the baby. Where did it go? I asked. Patrick typed. Scrolled. His expression grew darker. Most of it went to a retainer payment. To a law firm? Which one? He turned the screen toward us. Brennan and Associates. Family law. Brian had hired a lawyer. With Clover's money. 2 days after she gave birth, before she even knew she'd need one. He was planning this, I said quietly, from the beginning. Clover's voice was barely a whisper. He told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, but he knew exactly what he was doing. Patrick printed everything, handed me the copies. You'll need these, he said. And Mrs. Hayes? I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions when he came in. Should have? I took the papers. Thanked him. As we walked out, Clover stopped on the sidewalk, staring at nothing. How many people did he do this to? She asked. How many people heard his version first? I didn't have an answer, but I knew someone who might. Franklin Morris, the attorney Bonnie had mentioned. The one who handled cases like this. I pulled out my phone. because Brian had built his lie carefully, and now we were going to take it apart the same way. One document at a time. Franklin Morris's office was above a dry cleaner on Elm Street. The waiting room smelled like starch and old coffee. The furniture was worn but clean. This wasn't the kind of place that charged $500 an hour. It was the kind of place that actually listened. Franklin himself appeared in the doorway. Late 60s, gray beard, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He looked like someone's grandfather, which, I learned later, he was Ms. Hayes. Come on back. His office was small. Law books lined the walls. A framed photo of his grandkids sat on the desk next to a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Lawyer." He gestured for us to sit. Bonnie Fletcher called me. He said, "Told me a little bit about your situation. Why don't you start from the beginning?" Clover looked at me. I nodded. She told him everything. The birth, the exhaustion, Brian taking charge of everything while she recovered, the paperwork she never saw, coming home to find the locks changed, being told she'd left voluntarily, the bank account, the lawyer he'd hired with her money. Franklin listened without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, his expression neutral but focused. When Clover finished, he leaned back in his chair. "How many people has he told this story to?" Franklin asked. Clover's voice was small. "I don't know. Everyone, I think. His family, our neighbors, the hospital, the bank. Even my friends stopped answering my calls. Because they believed him," Franklin said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Franklin tapped his pen against the pad. "That's the problem with emotional abuse. It's not dramatic. It doesn't leave bruises people can photograph. It's quiet, methodical, and by the time the victim realizes what's happening, the narrative's already set." He looked at me. And people believe the first story they hear, especially when it's told by someone who seems calm and reasonable. I thought about Brian, his steady voice, his concerned expression, his perfect explanations. "What do we do?" I asked. Franklin pulled the folder toward him, the one with all our documents, discharge papers, bank records, call logs, the forged signature. He studied each page carefully. "This is good," he said finally. "This is really good. You've got a paper trail? That's half the battle." "What's the other half?" Clover asked. "Getting people to care," Franklin said bluntly. "The system doesn't like admitting it made mistakes. The hospital, the bank, social services, they all took Brian's word at face value. Admitting they were wrong means admitting they failed to protect you." Clover's face fell. "But," Franklin continued, "they're also terrified of lawsuits. And this," he tapped the forged signature. "This is fraud. Clear as day. The bank knows it. They're just hoping you won't push." "So we push," I said. Franklin smiled slightly. "We push smart, not loud. We don't go in yelling about injustice. We go in with documentation and we ask very polite questions they can't answer." He pulled out a fresh legal pad and started writing. "First, we file for emergency custody evaluation. We present the medical records showing you never abandoned your child. We show the bank records proving financial coercion. We show the timeline proving Brian built his case before you even left the hospital." Clover was listening now, hope flickering in her eyes. "Second," Franklin said, "we request a welfare check on the baby. Not because we think Brian's hurting him, but because we need an official record that you're seeking custody, that you're stable, present, and willing." "What if they say I'm not stable?" Clover asked quietly. Franklin looked at her directly. "Are you using drugs?" "No." "Drinking heavily?" "No." "Do you have a safe place to stay?" She glanced at me. "My mother's." Franklin wrote that down. "Then you're stable? The rest is just noise. Brian's been spreading." He handed me a business card. "There's a social worker I trust. Her name's Angela Ruiz. She specializes in postpartum cases. I want her to meet with Clover, document her mental state, and provide a professional assessment. When? I asked. Tomorrow if possible? The faster we move, the harder it is for Brian to adjust his story. Clover spoke up, her voice stronger now. What if he tries to say I'm lying? What if he says I'm making all this up because I'm angry? Franklin met her eyes. Then we show the court the voicemail you left from the gas station. We show them the hospital records. We show them the forged signature at the bank. And we ask Brian a very simple question. What question? Franklin's expression hardened. If your wife left voluntarily, why did you need to forge her signature to access her money? Silence. Clover exhaled slowly. Do you think this will work? Franklin was quiet for a moment. I think Brian's been operating on the assumption that nobody would believe you, that you'd be too ashamed or too scared to fight back. And I think he's about to learn he was wrong. He stood. We did too. One more thing, Franklin said as we reached the door. Don't contact Brian directly. Don't text him. Don't call him. Don't show up at his house. Everything goes through me now. Understood? We nodded. As we walked down the stairs, Clover grabbed my hand. Do you think people will finally believe me? She asked. I thought about Bonnie, about Patrick, about Franklin. Some already do, I said. The rest will follow. But I was already wondering who else Brian had convinced, and what he'd do when he realized we weren't going away. My apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a pull-out couch, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, but it was warm, safe, and for the first time in weeks, Clover could sleep without wondering if someone would take something else from her. The baby Noah she'd named him slept in a borrowed bassinet near the couch. He was tiny, perfect, and completely unaware that his first month of life had been a battlefield. Clover sat on the edge of the couch, staring at him. She hadn't said much since we got back from Franklin's office. I knew that look, the look of someone rewinding every conversation, every moment, wondering how she'd missed the signs. I should have known, she said quietly. I sat beside her. Nobody knows. That's how it works. He was so good at it, Mom. So convincing. Even I believed him sometimes. When he said I was overreacting, when he said I was too tired to think clearly, I started wondering if he was right. I put my arm around her. That's what he wanted. That's the whole point. She wiped her eyes. How long do you think he planned it? I didn't answer, because I'd been asking myself the same question. My phone buzzed. A text from Franklin. Social worker can meet tomorrow, 10 a.m. Confirm? I typed back. Confirmed. Then another text came through. This one from Bonnie. Be careful. Brian requested copies of Clover's full medical file this morning. Hospital approved it. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Clover asked. I showed her the message. Her face went pale. Why does he need my medical file? Because he's building his case, I said. He knows we're not backing down. So he's looking for ammunition. Clover stood, pacing now. What if there's something in there? Something he can twist? What if the nurses wrote down that I was crying or confused or stopped? I said gently, you just gave birth. Of course you were emotional. That's not a crime. But I understood her fear. Because, in the wrong hands, normal human reactions could be weaponized. Tears became instability. Exhaustion became incompetence. Asking for help became proof you couldn't handle things alone. Brian knew that. And he was good at making people see what he wanted them to see. The next morning, Angela Ruiz arrived exactly on time. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with warm brown eyes and a calm presence that filled the room without overwhelming it. She shook Clover's hand first, then mine. Franklin told me a bit about your situation, Angela said. I'm here to listen, not to judge, not to test you, just to understand what you've been through. Clover nodded, but I could see her hands shaking. Angela sat across from her, Notepad out, but not intrusive. Tell me about the day you gave birth. Clover started slowly. Then the words came faster. The contractions, the epidural, the exhaustion, Brian taking over, the papers she never saw, waking up at home with no clear memory of leaving the hospital, asking Brian where her bank card was, him saying she was too emotional to handle money right now, the locks changing, the door not opening, standing outside in the rain, calling her own husband, hearing his voice through the door telling her she needed to calm down first. Angela didn't interrupt. She just listened. And wrote? When Clover finished, Angela asked one question. When you called the hospital from the gas station, what did you say? Clover's voice cracked. I said I needed help. That I couldn't get back to my baby. That something was wrong. And what did they tell you? They said my husband reported that I'd left on my own, that I was struggling with postpartum depression, that he was taking care of everything. Angela wrote that down. Then she looked up. Clover, do you think you have postpartum depression? Clover hesitated. I don't know. I was sad and scared, but I don't think it was depression. I think it was... She searched for the word. Survival. Angela nodded slowly. That makes sense to me. It was such a simple statement, but Clover's whole body seemed to relax. Someone believed her. Angela spent another hour asking questions. About Noah, about Clover's support system, about her plans, her fears, her strengths. When she finally stood to leave, she shook Clover's hand again. I'll have my report ready by tomorrow, Angela said. And for what it's worth, you're not the first woman I've met who's been erased by someone who was supposed to protect her. After she left, Clover cried. But this time, it wasn't from shame. That afternoon, Franklin called. Brian's attorney reached out. He said, they want to meet. Informal mediation? They're calling it a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated flatly. They know we have documentation, Franklin said. They're trying to settle before this goes public. What do you think? I think Brian's scared, Franklin said. And I think we need to be ready for him to get desperate. I looked at Clover, playing with Noah on the floor. She looked lighter than she had in weeks. But I knew Franklin was right. Because men like Brian didn't give up power quietly. They fought, they twisted, they lied. And they always had a backup plan. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Certified mail. Official seal. The kind of thing that makes your heart drop before you even open it. I signed for it while Clover was in the shower. My hands were shaking as I tore it open. Petition for emergency custody. Brian Hayes versus Clover Hayes. I scanned the pages. Legal language. Cold, clinical. But the message was clear. Brian was requesting full custody of Noah. He claimed Clover was mentally unstable and unable to provide adequate care, that she'd abandoned the child, that she was currently residing in unstable housing conditions and under the influence of a third party. The third party was me, her mother. I kept reading. My chest tightened with every line. Respondent has demonstrated erratic behavior, including leaving the marital home without notice, failing to maintain contact with the minor child, and making unfounded accusations against petitioner in an apparent attempt to manipulate custody proceedings. Unfounded accusations. That's what he was calling it. The forged signature, the stolen money, the changed locks. All of it, according to Brian's lawyer, was a misunderstanding. A troubled woman lashing out at a concerned husband who'd been trying to help. But it was the next part that made my blood run cold. On March 17th, respondent was found living in unsanitary conditions near a public shelter, demonstrating an inability to care for herself, let alone an infant. Petitioner has grave concerns for the minor child's safety should custody be granted to respondent. March 17th, the day I found her. He'd been watching, or someone had told him. Either way, he knew exactly where she'd been, and now he was using it against her. The bathroom door opened. Clover came out, hair wrapped in a towel, looking more rested than she had in weeks. She saw my face. What happened? I handed her the papers. I watched her read. Watched her face go from confusion to horror to something that looked like collapse. "He's taking Noah," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "He's trying to take Noah. That's different." But my voice sounded more confident than I felt. She sat down hard on the couch. "He's saying I abandoned him, that I'm unstable, that I can't take care of myself. He's lying. But it sounds true, doesn't it?" Her voice was rising now, panic creeping in. I was living on the street. I didn't have anywhere to go. What if the judge believes him? I called Franklin immediately. He answered on the second ring. I could hear traffic in the background. "I just got the same filing," he said before I could speak. "I'm on my way to you now." 20 minutes later, he was sitting at my kitchen table, the petition spread out in front of him. He read in silence. His jaw tightened. "This is aggressive," he said finally. "But it's also sloppy." "Sloppy how?" I asked. He pointed to a date. "Right here. He claims Clover abandoned Noah on March 15th, but according to the hospital records, she was still admitted on the 15th. She wasn't discharged until the 16th. Clover leaned forward. "And I didn't leave. He sent me away." Franklin nodded. "Exactly. And look at this." He flipped to another page. He states that he's been the primary caregiver since birth, but the bank records show he withdrew $18,000 2 days after Noah was born. That's not the behavior of someone focused on childcare. "He paid his lawyer," I said. "With Clover's money?" Franklin added. "Which proves premeditation. He was planning this custody fight before Clover even knew she'd need to defend herself." Clover's voice was small. "But what if none of that matters? What if the judge just sees a mother who was homeless and decides, I'm not fit?" Franklin looked at her directly. "Then we show them why you were homeless. We show them the financial coercion, the forged documents, the changed locks. We show them that Brian didn't rescue you from instability. He created it." He pulled out his phone and started typing. "I'm requesting an expedited hearing. And I'm filing a counter-motion for supervised visitation pending investigation." "Investigation into what?" I asked. "Fraud, forgery, financial abuse, coercive control." Franklin's voice was hard now. "Brian wants to play hardball? Fine. But he's going to have to explain a lot of things under oath." Clover looked like she might cry. "What if he has more? What if there's something else I don't know about?" Franklin closed his folder. "Then we deal with it. But Clover, listen to me. This petition, it's not strength. It's fear. Brian knows we have the medical records. He knows we have the bank statements. He's trying to bury you in paperwork before the truth comes out. So what do? We don't react. We respond calmly, methodically, with every single document that proves he's been lying. He stood. And we do it fast, because the hearing's in 10 days. After he left, Clover sat in silence, holding Noah. "I hate that he can do this," she said quietly. "That he can just lie and make people believe him." I thought about the petition, the careful language, the way Brian had turned her worst moment into evidence against her. "He's good at it," I said. "But he made one mistake." "What?" "He assumed you'd be alone," I said. "That nobody would help you. That you'd just disappear." Clover looked at me. "But you didn't disappear," I said. "And now everyone's watching. I just hoped they'd see the truth before Brian could bury it." Franklin told me not to go. "Let me handle it," he'd said. "You confronting Brian won't help." But I wasn't confronting him. I was just ... observing. Brian lived in a townhouse complex off Route 9. Neat lawns, matching mailboxes. The kind of place where everyone smiled and nobody asked hard questions. I'd driven past it twice before I finally parked across the street. I told myself I just wanted to see where my grandson was living, where Clover had been locked out, where this had all started. I didn't expect to see Brian. He came out of the building carrying a gym bag, phone pressed to his ear. He looked good, rested, like a man with nothing to worry about. He didn't see me at first. I watched him unlock his car, a new sedan, shiny and expensive, and toss the bag in the back. Then I got out of my car. Brian? He froze, turned slowly. For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Then the mask slid back into place. Concerned, reasonable, hurt. Lillian. He said my name like I'd wounded him just by existing. I was hoping we could avoid this. Avoid what? I asked. Talking. Conflict. He walked closer, hands in his pockets. Casual, friendly. I know Clover's upset. I understand. But dragging lawyers into this isn't going to help anyone. Especially not Noah. There it was. The move. Making it about the baby. About doing the right thing. You filed for emergency custody, I said. I had to. His voice was so sincere. Lillian, I found out she was living on the street. On the street. I can't let my son be in that environment. You understand that, right? She was on the street because you put her there. His expression shifted, just slightly. A crack in the performance? That's not true, he said quietly. And I think you know it. I know you changed the locks. I changed them because she left in the middle of the night. I was scared. I didn't know where she'd gone. I didn't know if she was coming back. She called you. She asked to come home. She was incoherent, Brian said. She wasn't making sense. I told her we could talk when she calmed down, but she just kept yelling. Yelling? He was rewriting it again, turning her desperation into instability. You took her money, I said. It was our money. Joint account. I used it to pay bills, to take care of Noah, to hire a lawyer because I knew this was coming. He gestured between us. This. You turning her against me. I felt a flash of anger. I didn't turn her against you. You did that yourself, did I? His voice was softer now, almost sad. Or did you see your daughter struggling and decide someone had to be the villain? I loved Clover. I still do. But she wasn't coping. Lillian. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't eating. She'd just stare at Noah like she didn't know what to do with him. She'd just given birth. I know. And I tried to help. But she wouldn't let me. She kept saying I was controlling her, that I was trying to take the baby away. It wasn't true. But she believed it. And now you believe it too. He sounded so reasonable, so hurt. I understood, suddenly, why the hospital had believed him. Why the bank had believed him. Because Brian didn't sound like a liar. He sounded like a man trying to save his family from a woman who was falling apart. You forged her signature? I said quietly. His face went still. What? At the bank. The power of attorney. That wasn't her signature. Something shifted in his eyes. Something cold. You're reaching, he said. We have the documents. We compared them. Silence. Then he smiled. Just a little. Not friendly anymore. So what? He said. So I signed her name. She couldn't hold a pen. She was exhausted. She'd already agreed to everything verbally. I was just making it official. That's fraud. That's marriage. His voice hardened. We were partners. I made decisions when she couldn't. That's what husbands do. You locked her out? I set a boundary. There's a difference. You told everyone she abandoned Noah? She did. She walked out. I didn't force her to leave. I just didn't chase after her when she went. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Just ... confident. You know what the problem is, Lillian? You think Clover's some kind of victim? But she's not. She made choices. bad choices, and now she's trying to blame me for them. I stared at him, at this man who'd convinced so many people he was the good guy. You really believe that? I said. I know it, he said. And so will the judge. He turned toward his car, then paused. One more thing, he said without looking back. That townhouse. It's in my name. The car. My name. The credit cards. The utilities. The insurance. All mine. Clover doesn't have anything. And if she keeps pushing this, she'll end up with even less. He got in his car and drove away. I stood there, shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Because I realized something standing there in that parking lot. Brian believed his own lies. He'd told the story so many times. He'd convinced himself it was true. And that made him more dangerous than I'd thought. But it also made him careless. Because when I'd walked up, he'd been on the phone. And I'd heard part of the conversation. Something about a situation being handled and documentation coming through. I pulled out my phone and called Franklin. We need to talk, I said. Brian's planning something. And I think it involves more than just the custody hearing. What do you mean? I thought about Brian's confidence. His certainty. I think he's creating more evidence, I said. And we need to find out what it is before he uses it against her. Franklin was quiet for a moment. Meet me at my office, he said. 1 hour. I got in my car. Brian thought he'd won. Thought he'd scared me. Thought I'd back down. But he'd just made a mistake. He'd shown me exactly how far he was willing to go. And now I knew we had to go further. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Plain brick, narrow hallways, fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. Clover sat beside me on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, hands folded in her lap. She'd worn a simple dress, pulled her hair back. Franklin had told her to look calm, composed, like a mother who had nothing to hide. But I could see her legs shaking. Brian arrived with his lawyer 10 minutes later. The lawyer was younger than Franklin, sharper suit, briefcase that probably cost more than my car. Brian looked exactly like he had in the parking lot, confident, wronged, ready to tell his story. He didn't look at Clover, not once. Franklin appeared from the courtroom, motioning us inside. Remember, he said quietly to Clover, let me do the talking. Answer only what you're asked. And breathe. The judge was a woman in her 50s, reading glasses perched on her nose, expression neutral. Her nameplate read Judge Patricia Chun. She looked tired, like she'd heard 1,000 versions of this same story. Brian's lawyer went first. His name was David Brennan. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and spoke in that smooth courtroom voice that made everything sound like established fact. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My client, Mr. Hayes, is a devoted father seeking to protect his infant son from an unstable living situation. The respondent, Ms. Hayes, has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior, including abandoning the family home, living in transient conditions, and making baseless accusations designed to manipulate these proceedings. Judge Tune looked up. When did she abandon the home? March 16th, Your Honor. 2 days after giving birth? And where did she go? Brennan hesitated. Just for a second. She left without informing my client of her whereabouts. She was later found living near a homeless shelter. Found by whom? Her mother. Brennan gestured toward me like I was part of the problem. Judge Chun made a note. Continue. My client attempted to maintain contact, but Ms. Hayes refused communication. He provided financial support, maintained the home, and cared for the child alone. When it became clear that Ms. Hayes was not returning voluntarily, he had no choice but to seek legal protection for the minor child. It sounded so reasonable. Judge Chun turned to Franklin. Mr. Morris? Franklin stood. He didn't have the expensive suit, but he had something better, a timeline. He handed copies to the judge and to Brennan. Then he started talking. Your Honor, Mr. Brennan's narrative relies on the assumption that Ms. Hayes left voluntarily, but the evidence shows something very different. He walked her through it, step by step. March 14th. Clover gives birth at Good Shepherd Hospital. March 15th. Brian signs discharge papers alone, while Clover is still recovering. He also signs a Medicare form with what appears to be a forged signature. March 16th. Brian transfers $18,000 from the joint account to an account in his name only. The bank's own records show the signature authorization doesn't match Clover's known signature. That same day, Brian changes the locks on the townhouse. March 17th. Clover calls the hospital from a gas station, requesting help. The call is logged. She states she cannot access her home. March 18th. Brian hires Brennan and Associates using funds from Clover's inheritance. Franklin looked at the judge. "This isn't abandonment, Your Honor. This is financial coercion and deliberate isolation of a postpartum woman." Brennan was on his feet. "Your Honor, these are serious accusations with no basis in I have the bank records," Franklin said calmly. "I have the hospital call logs. I have testimony from the attending nurse. And I have documentation showing Mr. Hayes began building his legal case before Ms. Hayes even knew she needed to defend herself." Judge Chun held up a hand. "Mr. Brennan, did your client change the locks on the marital residence?" Brennan glanced at Brian. "He installed new locks for security purposes after Ms. Hayes left." "After she left," Judge Chun repeated. "Or before?" Silence. The judge looked at Brian directly. "Mr. Hayes, when did you change the locks?" Brian stood, calm, sincere. "The day after she walked out, Your Honor. I was scared. I didn't know where she'd gone. I had a newborn to protect." "And you didn't inform her?" "I tried. She wasn't answering her phone." Franklin spoke up. "Your Honor, if I may, the call log shows Ms. Hayes attempted to contact Mr. Hayes 17 times between March 16th and March 20th. He answered once. That call lasted 14 seconds. Judge Chun made another note. "And the bank account?" she asked. "That was necessary," Brian said. "Clover wasn't in a position to manage finances. She was overwhelmed. I was trying to protect our resources by transferring all of them into your name, by making sure the bills were paid and our son was provided for." His voice was perfect, reasonable, just hurt enough to seem genuine. Judge Chun looked at the timeline again, then at Franklin. "Mr. Morris, do you have the medical records?" Franklin handed them over, including the admission notes indicating Ms. Hayes was stable and alert at discharge. "And the call log showing she requested help 3 days later?" Judge Chun read in silence. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear Clover breathing beside me. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Hayes, you stated that your wife was not in a position to manage finances. On what basis did you make that determination?" "She was exhausted, Your Honor. Emotional. Not thinking clearly." "Was she diagnosed with postpartum depression?" Brian hesitated. "Not officially, but it was obvious." "To whom?" "To me. I'm her husband. I know when she's not herself." Judge Chun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room. "Mr. Morris, do you have a psychiatric evaluation?" Franklin stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Conducted by Angela Ruiz, a licensed social worker specializing in postpartum care. She found no evidence of depression, psychosis, or impaired judgment. Ms. Hayes was assessed as stable, coherent, and fully capable of caring for her child." He handed over the report. Judge Chun read it. Then she looked at Brennan. "Mr. Brennan, do you have a counter-evaluation?" Brennan shuffled papers. "We're in the process of obtaining one, Your Honor." "In the process?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Chun closed the folder. "Here's what I see," she said. "I see a woman who gave birth, was discharged from the hospital under questionable circumstances, had her financial resources removed without her knowledge, and was denied access to her own home. I also see a man who moved very quickly to establish legal and financial control. Brennan started to object. Judge Chun held up a hand. I'm not making a final determination today, but I am ordering an immediate investigation into the financial transactions and the hospital discharge. I'm also suspending any custody changes pending the outcome of that investigation. Brian's face went tight. In the meantime, Judge Chun continued, Ms. Hayes will have supervised visitation with the minor child. Mr. Hayes will provide full accounting of all financial transactions since the child's birth, and both parties will refrain from any contact except through counsel. She looked at Brian. Mr. Hayes, I strongly suggest you cooperate fully, because if I find evidence of fraud or coercion, this will become a very different kind of case. She banged the gavel. We're adjourned. Franklin turned to Clover. She was crying silently. We didn't win, she whispered. Not yet, Franklin said. But we didn't lose either. And that judge? She has questions. Good ones. As we walked out, I saw Brian in the hallway. His lawyer was talking urgently. Brian's face was stone. He looked at me, then at Clover. And for the first time, I saw something other than confidence. I saw fear. The call came 2 weeks later. Franklin's voice was different. Not excited, exactly, but something close. The investigator's report is in. He said, Can you come to my office? We were there in 20 minutes. The report sat on Franklin's desk, thick, official. The kind of document that carried weight. The court investigator interviewed everyone, Franklin said. The hospital staff, the bank manager, Brian's neighbors, even some of Clover's old friends. And, I asked. Franklin opened the folder. The hospital confirmed that Brian signed Clover out alone. The nurse who flagged the Medicare form provided a sworn statement that the signature looked inconsistent. The bank confirmed the transfer happened without proper authorization. Clover leaned forward. What does that mean? It means the investigator found evidence of financial coercion and probable forgery. Franklin flipped to another page. But there's more. Brian told the investigator that Clover left a note. A handwritten note saying she couldn't handle being a mother. My stomach dropped. There was no note. I know, Franklin said. So I asked him to produce it. He said he threw it away. Convenient? I muttered. Very, Franklin agreed. But here's the interesting part. Brian's neighbor woman named Mrs. Chun told the investigator she saw Clover trying to get into the house on March 16th. Crying, banging on the door. She said Brian opened the door, they argued, and then he closed it, locked it, and walked away. Clover went pale. She saw that, and she told the investigator it bothered her. But she didn't want to get involved at the time. Of course she didn't. Nobody ever wanted to get involved, Franklin continued. The investigator also reviewed Brian's phone records. He made 3 calls to Brennan and Associates before Clover even left the hospital. He was consulting a lawyer while his wife was recovering from childbirth. Premeditation, I said. Franklin nodded. Exactly what we needed to prove. Clover's voice was quiet. Does this mean I get Noah back? Franklin's expression softened. It means the court has serious concerns about Brian's credibility. It means the narrative he's been selling doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And it means we have a real chance at the next hearing. When is it? 3 days. Clover exhaled slowly. What if Brian has something else? What if he's been waiting to use it? Then we deal with it, Franklin said. But right now, he's on defense. And that's exactly where we want him. That afternoon, Bonnie called. I did something I probably shouldn't have, she said. What? I went back through Clover's medical file. The complete one. Not just the discharge papers. And there's an addendum filed 3 days after she gave birth. It's a nursing note I wrote but forgot to mention during the initial investigation. My heart was pounding. What does it say? It says that Clover specifically asked me not to let Brian take her home until she felt stronger. That she seemed frightened. Then when I told her the discharge had already been processed, she started crying and asked me to call someone. Anyone. Did you call anyone? Bonnie's voice was heavy with regret. I documented it, but I didn't escalate it. I thought the social worker would follow up. I didn't realize nobody did. Can you submit that note now? I already did. I sent it directly to the court investigator this morning. I closed my eyes. Thank you. I should have done more, Bonnie said. I knew something was wrong, but he was so convincing, and she was so quiet. After we hung up, I told Clover everything. She sat in silence, processing. People saw, she said finally. All those people saw something was wrong. But they didn't say anything. They're saying it now, I pointed out. Only because you made them. She was right. It had taken documentation, lawyers, investigations. It had taken someone refusing to let her be invisible. 2 days before the hearing, Franklin got one more piece of evidence. Patrick from the bank called him directly. I found something, Patrick said. When Brian requested the account transfer, he submitted a document claiming Clover had been diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. It's on letterhead from a psychiatric practice. Franklin's voice sharpened. Did you verify it? I called the practice. They have no record of Clover Hayes ever being a patient. Silence. He faked a medical document, Franklin said slowly. It looks that way. Franklin thanked him and hung up. Then he called me. Brian forged a psychiatric diagnosis. He said, that's not just fraud. That's falsifying medical records. That's a felony. I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. Does the prosecutor know? They will by tomorrow morning. That night, Clover couldn't sleep. She kept pacing, holding Noah, whispering to him like she was practicing being his mother again. What if they still don't believe me? She asked. I thought about Bonnie's note, Patrick's call, Mrs. Chun's testimony, the investigator's report. They already do, I said. The question now is what they're going to do about it. The next morning, Franklin called with news. Brian's lawyer wants to settle. Settle how? Joint custody. Shared finances. No criminal charges filed. I felt a flash of anger. He faked a medical document and they want to let him walk away. He's scared, Franklin said. And his lawyer knows if this goes to trial, Brian's looking at serious consequences. What does Clover want? I asked. Franklin was quiet. That's up to her. I handed the phone to Clover. She listened. Then she spoke, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. No deal, she said. I want the truth on record. I want everyone to know what he did. Because if we settle, he'll just do this to someone else. Franklin's voice came through the speaker. Are you sure? A trial means everything becomes public. It means reliving all of this. I'm sure, Clover said. I've been invisible long enough. She hung up. I looked at my daughter, at this woman who'd been erased, silenced, told she was crazy. And I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Strength. The hearing was in 12 hours. And Brian was about to learn that the woman he'd tried to erase had found her voice. And she wasn't backing down. The courtroom was fuller this time. The investigator sat in the back, folder thick with findings. Bonnie was there, in her scrubs, having come straight from a shift. Patrick sat beside her, hands folded. Even Mrs. Chun, Brian's neighbor, had shown up, looking uncomfortable but determined. People who'd seen pieces of the truth were finally willing to say so out loud. Judge Chun entered, and we all stood. Brian sat at his table, straight-backed, jaw tight. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Brian didn't respond. He just stared ahead, like he could will this whole thing to go away through sheer force of control. But control was the one thing he didn't have anymore. Judge Chun settled into her seat and opened the investigator's report. She read for what felt like an eternity. Then she looked up. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I've reviewed the findings. I've read the witness statements. And I've examined the documentation your attorney submitted regarding your wife's alleged mental instability." Brian straightened. "Yes, Your Honor. I contacted the psychiatric practice listed on that letterhead." Brian went very still. "They have no record of treating Ms. Hayes. In fact, they confirmed the document was never issued by their office." Brennan stood quickly. "Your Honor, there may have been a clerical error." "A clerical error." Judge Chun's voice was flat. "Mr. Brennan, your client submitted a fraudulent medical document to a financial institution in order to gain control of marital assets. That's not a clerical error. That's a crime." The courtroom was silent. Judge Chun continued. "I've also reviewed the timeline Mr. Morris provided. The hospital records, the call logs, the witness testimony from the attending nurse, the bank manager, and a neighbor who observed Ms. Hayes being denied access to her own home." She looked directly at Brian. "Mr. Hayes, you painted a picture of a woman who abandoned her child. But what I see is a woman who was systematically isolated, financially controlled, and legally erased. And I see a man who knew exactly what he was doing." Brian's lawyer tried again. "Your Honor, my client was acting in good faith." "Good faith!" Judge Chun cut him off. "Good faith doesn't involve forging signatures. It doesn't involve fabricating medical diagnoses. And it certainly doesn't involve locking a postpartum woman out of her own home and telling everyone she left voluntarily." She closed the folder. "Here's my ruling. Full custody of the minor child is awarded to Ms. Hayes. Effective immediately. Mr. Hayes will have supervised visitation pending a criminal investigation into fraud and forgery charges." Brian's face drained of color. "Furthermore," Judge Chun continued, "Mr. Hayes will return all funds taken from the joint account, plus interest. The house, if it was purchased with marital funds, will be subject to equitable distribution. And Ms. Hayes's medical records will be formally corrected to remove any false information submitted by Mr. Hayes or his representatives." She looked at Clover. Her expression softened just slightly. "Ms. Hayes, I apologize on behalf of this court. You should never have been in this position. The systems that were supposed to protect you failed. But the record is being corrected, and your voice has been heard." Clover was crying. Quiet tears, the kind that come from relief, not pain. Judge Chun turned back to Brian. "Mr. Hayes, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office. You'll be hearing from them shortly. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Franklin turned to Clover, smiling for the first time since I'd met him. "You did it," he said simply. Clover just nodded, unable to speak. Brian stood stiffly. He didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone. He walked out with his lawyer, shoulders rigid, the careful mask finally cracked beyond repair. Outside the courthouse, Bonnie hugged Clover. "I'm sorry I didn't do more sooner," she said. "You did enough," Clover told her. "You believed me. That's what mattered." Patrick shook my hand. "I should have asked more questions at the bank." "You asked them when it counted," I said. Mrs. Chun approached hesitantly. "I should have said something that day. When I saw you at the door?" Clover looked at her. "You said something when it mattered too." One by one, the people who'd seen pieces of the truth drifted away, back to their jobs, their lives, their own quiet battles. But they'd shown up, and that meant something. A week later, Clover got a letter from Social Security, an official apology for processing documents without proper verification, a correction to her records, a restoration of her access to benefits that had been improperly suspended. It was bureaucratic, cold, but it was acknowledgement. She existed again. Not as someone's confused wife, not as a woman too emotional to handle her own life, just as Clover. The bank sent a new debit card, her name embossed on the front. A small thing, but when she held it, she cried. "It's just a card," she said, laughing through the tears. It's not just a card, I told her. It's proof you're real. Brian took a plea deal 2 months later. Fraud charges reduced in exchange for a guilty plea. Probation, restitution, and a permanent record that would follow him. He never apologized. But he also never told another lie about Clover. Because now, the truth lived in court documents, in hospital records, in bank statements, in places he couldn't erase. Clover got an apartment. Small, affordable, but hers. I helped her move in. We painted Noah's room together soft blue, with clouds on the ceiling. She hung pictures, set up a crib, made a home. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen, Noah on her hip, sunlight streaming through the window. I keep waiting for someone to take this away, she said quietly. Nobody can, I told her. Not anymore. She looked at me. What if I'd given up? What if I'd believed him? But you didn't. Only because you didn't let me. I thought about that day outside the bank. How small she'd looked. How invisible. You were never as small as he told you. I said, you just needed someone to remind you. She smiled. Really smiled. Thank you, Mom. We stood there, in her kitchen, in her home, with her son babbling happily in her arms. And I realized that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing in her own kitchen, holding her child, with a debit card in her name, and a door that only she has the key to. That night, I got a message from Franklin. The prosecutor wants to use this case for training, showing other professionals how to spot coercive control. Thought Clover should know. I showed her the message. She read it twice. Then she typed a response. Tell them yes. If it helps one person, it's worth it. She sent it. Then she put the phone down and picked up Noah. Come on, baby, she said softly. Let's go home. Home, not his home. Not their home. Hers. And nobody, ever again, could take that away. I watched them go. My daughter and my grandson, walking toward a life she'd had to fight for. A life she'd earned. Not through revenge. Not through bitterness. But through the simple, stubborn act of refusing to disappear. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told your truth doesn't matter, if you've ever been made small by someone who was supposed to love you, I need you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not confused. You're not too emotional. You're just dealing with someone who needs you to believe you are. And the moment you stop believing them, that's when everything changes. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever lived through something like this, because your story matters too. And somebody, somewhere, needs to hear that they're not alone.